you have your Sunday school book, we're going to use the map just inside the back page. Otherwise, I have those handouts back there on the back. And that is a map of Paul's journey to Rome. And it really helps me when you look at the map. And so today's message is headed for Rome. Acts 27, verses 1 through 12. And when it was determined that we should sail into Italy, they delivered Paul and certain other prisoners unto one named Julius, a centurion of Augustus' band. And entering into a ship of Adramyttium, we launched, meaning to sail by the coast of Asia. One Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, being with us. And the next day we touched at Sidon. And Julius courteously entreated Paul and gave him liberty to go unto his friends to refresh himself. And when we had launched from thence, we sailed under Cyprus because the winds were contrary. And when we had sailed over the sea of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia. And there the centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing into Italy, and he put us therein. And when we had sailed slowly many days, and scarce were come up over against Cnidus, the wind not suffering us, we sailed under Crete over against Salmon. And hardly passing it came to a place which is called the Fair Havens, nigh whereunto was the city of Lasea. Now when much time was spent, and when sailing was now dangerous, because the fast was now already past, Paul admonished them, and said unto them, Sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with hurt and much damage, not only the lading in ship, but also of our lives. Nevertheless, the centurion believed the master and the owner of the ship more than those things which were spoken by Paul. And because the haven was not commodious to winter in, the more part advised to depart thence also, if by any means they might attain to Phoenicia or Phoenix, and there to winter, which is in a haven of Crete, and lie toward the southwest and northwest. So that's a lot of funny names to look at, and a lot of geographical references, and I believe the map will help you. Headed for Rome, 3 divisions. Number 1, the centurion's kindness, verses 1 through 3. Number 2, changing ships, verses 4 through 8. And number 3, a critical mistake, verses 9 through 12. A little bit to get us in context. So Paul was 2 years imprisoned under Felix, who, after examining Paul, found nothing wrong. But he was hoping to get a bribe from Paul, which he never did. So he left him 2 years in chains in order to please the Jews. Well, he was not a good governor. The Jews complained, and Rome replaced him with a new governor named Festus. And so Festus got into office, had Paul examined, and he really didn't find anything wrong. And he wanted to send Paul back to Jerusalem, which Paul figured out if he went to Jerusalem, he would probably be killed, probably even on the way, and would not make it out alive. So he did all that he could do. I guess in football we would say it was a Hail Mary pass, very end. And he appealed to Caesar, which was his right as a Roman citizen. And so that was in practice. And then he met with King Herod Agrippa II, who came to visit the new governor They had a real fancy meeting honoring Agrippa. And after that, Paul got to speak, give his testimony. And then they met privately, and Agrippa said, you know, if he had appealed to Caesar, he could be let go and go free. Because he had done nothing worthy of death, had done nothing worthy of being in jail. So the verdict is, send him to Rome, and he will get his appeal in Rome. I believe F. Bruce wrote about this account, chapter 27 to chapter 28 of the voyage to Rome and the shipwreck. He says this: Luke's narrative of the voyage and shipwreck of Paul is one of the most instructive documents for the knowledge of ancient seamanship. Luke is very good about writing details about various offices of the Roman Empire, the different provinces, and he writes historical things that many people through the ages have said that can't be right, and then archaeology proves to him that he was right. And he gives very many details about the places that they went, because notice in verse 1, here is another wee passage. So Luke was with Paul on his journey. Well, they were at Caesarea, which is the northern part of the Holy Land, and they needed to go north, and then they needed to go west. But they can't go directly west, because in that time of year, the winds were coming out of the west and northwest, and that's the direction they needed to go, which made sailing very difficult. They didn't have compasses. They were not invented yet. They didn't have star charts. They depended on the stars, and for short trips, for landmarks, islands, seacoasts. So later on, when they'll have no light for days, they're in trouble because they don't know where they are. Number 1, verses 1 through 3, a centurion's kindness. So verse 1, Paul has appealed to Caesar, and Caesar he will go. And so they're going to Italy, to Rome. So they gave Paul and certain other prisoners under the command, under the watch of a man named Julius, who was a centurion. And that means he was over 100 soldiers, and he was centurion of Augustus' band. Now remember, Augustus is not a name, it is a title like Caesar or Pharaoh. It just means the August one. And we really don't know exactly what an Augustan band was. There's not really that much in history to tell us. Here in this case, and many people, that's what it was for taking prisoners into Rome. One thought was that perhaps it was an escort for the emperor when he wanted to travel. It's meant to be an honorary title. So verse 2, now there is Caesarea. In verse 2, they entered to a ship of Adramyttium. Adramyttium is part of Asia Minor. I don't know if it's on the map that we got. Oh, it is. So they're Asia Minor toward the north and the west. So this ship, and this would be a smaller ship, and the smaller ships, they would go from port to port, and they would unload cargo and get new cargo. So it would stay close to the coast and make many stops. So well, at least that's headed toward Rome. So they got on that ship and they took off. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to go by the coast of Asia. And see on your map, there on the south part, they want to go south along those borders. And Paul didn't go by himself. There were other prisoners. By the way, the Greek word means others of a different kind. So Paul was going on appeal. The others may have been actually condemned to death and were going to be executed. They have been condemned to be fighters in the Colosseum as gladiators. The other prisoners, verse 2, all had two companions with him, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, and obviously Luke. So he asked the question, so how can Paul, who is a prisoner, how can he have two to go with him? Two suggestions. One is that Luke would go as his doctor. We know he was a physician. And that Aristarchus could go as an attendant, as a servant. This Aristarchus, more about him in the New Testament. In the book of Colossians, Paul calls him his fellow prisoner. So he was in jail with Paul at one time. Reminds me of Jeff Foxworthy joke. So Jeff Foxworthy said, you know, a friend won't just bail you out of jail. A friend will go to jail with you. So here Paul has two friends, Luke and Aristarchus, who are actually going with him on the way, on the journey. And in the city of Ephesus, they had that great riot, and they looked for Paul. They couldn't find him, but Aristarchus and another man named Gaius, they seized him and brought him out in the public. Now, fortunately, you had a good leader in Ephesus who quelled the riot and made them quit and dispelled it and made them leave. But here Paul has two friends going with him on his journey. So verse 3, and the next day we touched at Sidon. The Old Testament was these Sidon. That is in north of Caesarea. One guy said it was 67 miles, another one said it was 70, and others said it was 80 miles. But that was a port, and it was well known for its commerce. The Phoenicians, and they got there. And here's something that's really unusual. Julius earnestly entreated Paul and gave him freedom to go visit his friends and be refreshed. I remember, even though Paul is been declared not guilty yet, because of his appeal, he has to go to Rome and have his case heard. But he is a prisoner. And that almost certainly that means that there will always be a guard with him at all times. But this is unusual. He allows Paul to go and visit with his friends. Maybe he needed to be with Luke and have doctoring done. Maybe he needed to go and just get supplies, what they need to travel on the ship. Remember, he has been in prison for 2 years and unable to go anywhere, do anything outside of that in Caesarea. So this is a kindness. And the word courteously is where we get the English word philanthropy from. which literally means end of man or love of man. So there they make it a Sidon, no problems, and Paul gets to visit his friends and get whatever he needs for the journey, get refreshed. And then number 2, we see them changing ships. Verse 2. And when we had launched from thence from Sidon, we sailed under Cyprus because the winds were contrary. And notice that Cyprus is north and east of the Holy Land. Cyprus is an island, and that is where Barnabas was from. And to protect themselves from the westerly winds, the northwesterly winds, they went up on the east side of the island, and then probably hugged the island, and then they went that way. And notice, last part of verse 4, we sailed under Cyprus because the winds were contrary. They were having difficulty with the winds. They were wanting to go west, and the winds were blowing from the west. And they didn't have engines in those days. It was difficult. So verse 5, and when we had sailed over the sea of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia. And again, look on your maps. This today would be part of what is Asia. And you see Cilicia, and then you see Pamphylia, west of it, and then you see Lycia, the west of it. So they're going from east to west, and they're sailing probably as close to the coast as they can. They get to Lycia, and they get to a place called Myra. And notice on your map that Myra is almost completely north of Alexandria, Egypt. Myra was a port that was well suited to take care of the big grain ships from Egypt. Rome was very dependent on food and grain from Egypt, and they often sailed from Alexandria, and they would go north to Myra, and they would stop there. The ships, they were owned by individuals, but they were contracted with Rome to bring them grain. So there they make it to Myra. In verse 6, this centurion, no doubt, he is looking for better accommodations. He's looking for a bigger ship. And he found a ship of Alexandria sailing, and that's just what he wanted. And later on, we will see that their load is wheat. They're taking food to Italy. And so he gets them on that boat. Verse 7, and when we had sailed slowly many days, they were having trouble. The wind was blowing against them, and they're having trouble. And so they decided to do a little bit different. And they got to, barely made it to Cnidus with the wind giving them much difficulty. Then they went south and west to the island Crete. And he said, we sailed under Crete over against Salmon. Salmon is on the northeast tip of Crete. And then they go down the eastern side, and they're sailing south on Crete. And taking advantage of being sheltered from the winds. There is one part of their journey that they were able to take advantage of a western current that was very close to the shore. But they've gone about that far that way as they can, and now they go southwest. and they're at Crete, and get to verse 8, and again, they're having difficulty. They get on the south side of Crete, and they get to a place called the Fair Havens, or I saw one translation had it, the Good Harbors. And that was close to the city of Lasea. Now, verse 9, we see that they are in the dangerous part of the stelling season. So, verse 9, they've had difficulty on almost all of their journey, and they're not making good time. And now they're really in trouble. The dangerous season is from September the 14th to November the 11th. You really shouldn't sail during that time. After November 11th, you would not sail until mid-March because of the winter and the storms. And they were already in the danger period because the fast, which was the Day of Atonement, was already gone. The Day of Atonement happens in the end of September or the early part of October. The Jewish calendar is based on the moons, and so their festival days will be on different days of our calendar. So and some believe this was the year AD 59, and if that was the case, then the Day of Atonement was October the 5th. And if that was already passed, and they really shouldn't be sailing. So they're already in the dangerous season of sailing. And so, last part of verse 9, verse 10, Paul gives advice. Paul encouraged me, he said, "Sirs, I perceive," and the word here for perceive is to see, and I think that's the idea of seeing by experience. Paul is well-traveled. He's already had 3 missionary journeys, which he's been sailing. In 2 Corinthians, there's a verse that says, "I have already been shipwrecked 3 times, and one of those, I think he said, I spent a day and a night in the deep." That means one of the shipwrecks, he was in the water for a day and a night. So Paul understands sailing. He understands the dangers of sailing during the wrong time of the year. And I believe those 3 were before this, and so this next one will probably be his 4th shipwreck. So he didn't want to go through that again. So it says, you guys listen to me. By my experience, I think that if we continue with this voyage, then we're going to have trouble. There's going to be much damage. You're going to lose your cargo and maybe the ship, and you're going to risk our lives. I don't think we should go. And I don't believe this was a prophecy from God. I think this was from Paul's own experience. Now later on, an angel will appear to him and give him knowledge. Verse 11, "Nevertheless, the centurion believed the master, the owner of the ship." By the way, many in that day, the owner of the ship would also be, believe it or not, the captain. And so, in this case, the owner of the ship was a captain, and he gave the advice, "No, we go on, we can make it." And so, the centurion, he believed the owner of the ship, the captain, more than Paul. Go to verse 11. "And because that harbor was not a really good place to spend the winter in, then almost everybody else, they also advised, 'Hey, let's leave.' So if by any means they might attain to Phoenicia or Phoenix, and there to winter, which is a haven of Crete, lies to the southwest and northwest." So Phoenix was only 40 miles away. That doesn't sound like much, does it? And that's probably the reason why they thought, man, we can make it. We're on the south side of the island, and we stay close to the island. Well, surely we can make 40 miles by sea. Wrong. They didn't know that a storm was coming. And so the critical mistake was he didn't take Paul's advice. They took the owner's advice of the ship. By the way, the centurion, he had authority, and his decision would go, even though he didn't own the ship. He was responsible for the soldiers, the prisoners, and the cargo. As Ricky Ricardo would say to Lucy, you're going to have a whole lot of explaining to do. Because lost the ship, lost the wheat, lost all the lading in the ship, everything. God was fortunately, and they wouldn't lose their lives, but we'll see that later, Lord willing. So, 3 applications. Application number 1, be kind. Be kind to one another. Be kind to strangers. This centurion, he didn't have to be kind to Paul and allow him to go and visit his friends and get refreshed before the journey to Rome, but he did. And we need to be kind to others. Show the love of Jesus. Number 2, be a friend. Luke and Aristarchus, they went on this journey with Paul. And we don't know, but they may very well have gone as Paul's slaves. That may have been the only way. A guy named Ramsey, he wrote that he thought that Luke and Aristarchus went as Paul's slaves, and that was the only way that they could go with Paul. And that is truly being a friend. And we need to be friends, because the world is an unfriendly place. And those without Jesus, without salvation, they have no hope. And, whether they're like us, or they're different, or whether they're rich or poor, whatever they are, they need us to be their friends and share the good news that Jesus saves with them. Then number 3, don't follow the crowd. Follow God. Be wise. Not always, but most times the crowd is going to go the wrong direction. So don't follow the crowd. Follow God. And if in those rare cases it's the crowd, then that's okay. And unfortunately, what the crowd is doing in the world today? They're rejecting Jesus, and they're headed for destruction. For broad is the way, and wide is the gate that leads to destruction, and many there be that goes through that gate. But straight and narrow is the gate that leads to life, and few there be that find it. Jesus is the only way to eternal life, and the majority of people do not take that road through Jesus. If you see this message on YouTube or Facebook, and you don't know Jesus as Lord, let this be your day of salvation, and give your heart to Jesus and commit to Him as Lord. Don't follow the crowd, but follow God's children as they head toward our heavenly home. May the Lord bless His word. And Brother Dennis, would you close us in prayer?